Hey there! We are the representatives of the young generation. We care about global issues such as ecological problems and human rights inequality. We believe that little changes, especially in thoughts and opinions, can be a reason of this world becoming a better place. Let's protect our home as if it was our mother. My name is Annie, and my knowledge about nature is not much than yours. However, don't you mind if we will learn together?
Paper recycling plants, first steps in selective recycling, wartime recycling, plastic eating bacteria. Have you ever thought about how all of this had begun? Nobody knows who exactly was the very person to recycle. But while sources are too unreliable to confirm its practice during the Bronze Age, historians are nonetheless certain that the principle of recycling came hand in hand with the development of the first human craftsmen. However, some archaeological research projects have proven that proto-waste from ancient Greece contained fewer used tools or broken vases during times of recession. This would imply that materials were systematically reused and melted down to make new pieces. In the year 1031, there is evidence that documents the existence of paper recycling in Japan, although it is assumed that their Chinese neighbors, the inventors of paper, were the first to begin recycling and that the procedure traveled to Japan from China. Due to the scarcity of plant fibers, the used paper was crushed until a pulp was obtained with which the recycling was carried out. The pulp was a grayish color because it was made from paper already dyed with ink. The idea spread to several different human communities and took new forms. In 1st century China, the Minister for Agriculture in the Han Dynasty recommended that subject of the emperor boil old linen rags to make paper. This method was brought to Europe in the 8th century by Arab civilizations after their forays into the Far East, and rag and bone men appeared. In the medieval West, waste management became particularly problematic. Towns sprouted up everywhere, population numbers soared, and the amount of waste grew. As there were no laws to govern how it was handled, waste built up in the streets and rivers and remained a real concern right up to the Renaissance, when monarchs such as Francis I began calling for the use of baskets to collect refuse, and this made it easier to reuse. In England, the first professional recyclers began collecting the dust and ash generated by open fires in houses. Then sold it on to brick manufacturers who used it as a very inexpensive base material. In Japan, paper recycling had already been around for several centuries and techniques were being fine-tuned. Paper recycling plants. In the year 1690, soon after settling in the newly created town of Germantown, Philadelphia, German immigrant and paper manufacturer William Rittenhouse purchased 20 acres of land to build the first paper recycling plant in the New World. Just 2 years after the first similar plants in England became operational. Old rags and pieces of linen, the fiber that was the main raw material of making paper in England and its American colonies, were collected by wagons and transported to the plant. First patent for a recycling process. In the year 1800, the English paper manufacturer Matthias Coombs patents a novel procedure to extract ink from paper and convert this paper into pulp. The method devised by Coombs offered, for the first time, the possibility of obtaining high-quality recycled paper from waste paper. To prove he didn't need linen rags to make paper, that same year, Coombs published the first book printed on recycled paper. A year later, the entrepreneur obtained a government license to build a large paper-making factory in Millbank. The history of modern recycling. In the 19th century, recycling took a new lease of life with the Industrial Revolution. In the space of just a few decades, factories were sprouting up around cities, manufactured products were everywhere, and urban populations were growing even more. The discovery of bacteria made people aware of sanitary concerns, and measures were taken to curb their growth. In 1870, in Paris, a governmental decree finally prohibited the deposit of waste on the streets and obliged all citizens to procure a personal recipient. A few years later, poubelle, the prefect of the sign, made Parisians place a lid on those recipients and gave his name to the new object, la poubelle, the rubbish bin. First steps in selective recycling. From 1874 to 1904. More than 2 millennia after Athens became the first city in the Western world to implement a program for the treatment of household waste, consisting of depositing the waste far from the city limits, the American city of Baltimore launched the first organized program of selective recycling with differentiated containers for the main types of waste. In that same year, 1874, in Nottingham, the first incineration plant for household waste came into operation. 3 years later, in 1897, the city of New York established the first materials recycling center. The waste was collected, transported, and deposited in large areas where paper, metal, carpets and fabrics, burlap bags, and other textiles, twine, rubber, and even horsehair were separated for later recycling and reuse. And in 1904, the first 2 plants for recycling cans and aluminum containers were opened in Chicago and Cleveland. Wartime recycling from 1941 to 1942. Recycling was also very present during more distressing periods, such as the Second World War. In 1941, the British government imposed garment rationing on its population with a point system that assigned a value to each item of clothing. During that time, everything could have a second use. Even the lace that once adorned a dress now served as a bandage. In the US, the enormous war effort sparked by its entry into the war led the Roosevelt administration to begin a campaign to urge the population to collect used cooking fat, tin cans, metals, or any material that could be used to make explosives and weapons. Even Disney's Pluto and Minnie Mouse did their bit with the short film Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Firing Line, in which a voice-over said that a skillet of bacon grease is a little munitions factory. A fairly basic system. Up to the 1970s, professional sorting and recycling grew rapidly, again when people became aware of environmental issues. Governments and industries gradually highlighted its importance. The first legal texts laying out guidelines for its practice began to appear. The first recycling companies were founded, and the sector joined the industrial era. And since then, it has continued to be studied and improved. The 3 R's. In the year 1970, this marked the first time that Earth was commemorated, dedicated to raising awareness of the environmental problems caused by the accumulation of waste and to emphasize the importance of recycling. This celebration marks the official birth of modern recycling, as we understand it today, as a movement for the defense and protection of the environment and for sustainability. It emerged in response to the growing throwaway culture established in the developed world since the beginning of the 20th century and as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution and mass production, and with it the accessibility to all types of goods and products. It is also from this moment when the logo, with which recycling is currently identified, is introduced and begins to be popular. Inspired by the Mobius ribbon and consisting of 3 arrows converted into the vertices of a triangle that connects the 3 principles that define the movement: reduce, reuse, recycle. The image was designed by Guy Anderson and originally created for a contest organized by a Chicago recycling company. Plastic-eating bacteria. In the year 2016, Japanese researchers discovered a new species of bacteria living in landfills, named Ideonella sacchinensis, that feeds on the plastic of bottles in containers by secreting a pair of enzymes capable of breaking down in only 6 weeks polyethylene terephthalate, PET, the polymer from which most plastic containers are manufactured. 2 years later, British and American scientists managed to modify one of the original enzymes to obtain a more effective and faster version that breaks down PET in a few days. In addition, it is also capable of degrading another type of material, polyethylene furanoate, PEF, used as an alternative in the production of containers. Both discoveries opened the door to having a method to treat and dispose of plastic waste in the near future. Nowadays, they constitute one of the main environmental problems threatening the planet due to their durability and massive accumulation in the environment. The challenge now is to turn this laboratory treatment into an economically profitable, large-scale industrial process. So I'm gonna tell you about 5R concept, which refers to the well-known 3R. Reduce, reuse, recycle, and can be widened further. Refuse. Say no to things that you don't really need, even if they are given to you for free. Reduce. Change your consumption habits. Buy things that are only absolutely necessary. Look for products without any packaging or the one that can be recycled. Get one product that can be used over and over again, instead of large amounts of disposable goods. Reuse. Use the same item more than once instead of disposing it right away. Repair broken things instead of purchasing new ones. Repurpose. Give the old material a new purpose. Be creative. Recycle. Waste can be recycled and used again in production. It requires far less resources than producing a new material. Make sure your waste is being collected by one of the recycling companies on a regular basis.
Thank you, dear listener, for being with me today. Follow You Have a Mother on Instagram, listen to our podcast every week, and share it with your buddies. We would be so glad if you did this. Take care, and bye for now.